Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I came to the floor the other night to talk about what I had learned in 2 years of town hall meetings in Colorado regarding our deficit, regarding our debt. And what I said the other night was that people in our state, whether in red parts of the state or blue parts of the state, have a common sense way of approaching this, and they've got a three-part test that they want to apply. First test is they want to make sure that we actually come up with something that materially addresses the problem we face. They're tired of gimmicks, they're tired of tricks. They really want us to sort this out. They know it's not going to be fixed overnight, but they want us to get started on it. The second test is that we're all in it together. They're tired of the us against them conversation that happens in Washington. They're tired of hearing that one person's ox is going to be gored or one group of people's ox is going to be gored and everyone else is going to be left alone. Everybody wants to contribute to solving this problem. The third test is that they want it to be bipartisan because, frankly, they don't have confidence in either party on this issue and they want to see us working together. That's it. And we should be working toward that as a Senate and as a House. We should be having a serious conversation about how not to leave our children stuck with a bill of $15 trillion of debt and a $1.5 trillion deficit. I feel that keenly as the father of 3 little girls myself. But I think it is very important for the American people to understand the debate we're having right now. The threat that we're going to shut the government down has nothing to do with the broader conversation about our deficit and our debt. In fact, shutting the government down is just going to make matters worse. I said the other night that there is not a superintendent of schools, I used to be one in Colorado, there's not a city council or a mayor in Colorado from the largest city to the smallest town who would dream of saying to their constituents, we can't work this out, so we're going to close the government next week. We can't work this out, so we're not going to plow your snow next week or pick up your trash next week or educate your kids next week. Not one local official in our state. The presiding officer knows this. He was a mayor. You would never have gone to your constituents and said, oh, by the way, we're closing next week because we have a disagreement. It makes no sense. Nowhere on the planet would that make any sense. To say nothing of the fact that we find ourselves at a moment in the country's history when we are engaged in wars all across the globe, when we're now involved in a multilateral effort in Libya, when we've got thousands of people that are government employees trying to help the Japanese weather this unbelievable tragedy that they're facing, when we have economic competitors all over the globe that are trying to seek an economic advantage against the United States in the 21st century, we're saying, well, we're going to take a time out because we can't agree. We're going to pause, take a rest, close the government. So the American people must think, well, you guys must be very far apart. And that's why I brought this slide. Now, I don't know the exact details here. Nobody does. The reports on the news tonight were that several $billions separated the negotiators. And I've heard it range from, 5 to 10, or somewhere in there. So I picked the number 7, which is more than several. But that appears to be what divides the parties. $7 billion, Mr. President. $7 billion. That is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But look at it in the context of our deficit and our operating budget. So here is this line. You can't even see it. This line is the $7 billion right here. Okay? This is our deficit, and this is our operating budget. $1.5 trillion, $3.6 trillion. I apologize, Mr. President, but I couldn't fit it on one sign. I had to have 2 signs to be able to show what the order of magnitude difference is between what we're squabbling over here in Washington and what our deficit looks like and what our operating budget looks like. That's it. That's it. That's it. Do you know this difference? If this were the city of Alamosa, the former mayor is the presiding officer in my state, which has roughly a $14 million operating budget in the San Luis Valley, if they were saying we were going to shut down our government based on this difference, that would be like Alamosa saying we can't figure it out because $27,000 is what we're apart. Mr. President, if you and I went to Applebee's tonight and we had their $20 dinner for two, and then we had a fight over the bill, we would be fighting over 4 cents. That's what would separate us. Roughly 0.19% of our operating budget. I could even understand if the parties were saying we disagree, let's keep negotiating. But I can't, for the life of me, understand how on those terms anyone could threaten a government shutdown, especially when we confront the dangers that we confront today. And the answer is that it's not about our budget. The time that we've consumed here is taking time away from the conversations that you and I have been part of, that people on the other side of the aisle have been part of, that the Gang of Six, a bipartisan group of senators, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans led by Mark Warner and Saxby Chambliss, have been working on. That's what we should be doing. But we shouldn't be threatening to close the government. I don't think we should be threatening to close the government under any circumstances, but certainly not when the economics are as thin as that. And I know there are people, and it's not all Republicans, there's some people in the House that, just feel like the social issues that they've attached to this piece of budget legislation are somehow more important than keeping the government open, or that litigating those issues in the context of trying to keep the government open is the right thing to do. I disagree. I think they should have a hearing. I think that we ought to have a floor discussion about what we want to do with women's reproductive health or the other issues that are there. I'm glad to have that debate. But don't threaten to shut the government down based on that. And so I will say again, as I said the other night, that I encourage the leaders of both parties in both chambers, our president, to find a way to settle this, to find a way to work it out, to find a way to keep this government open at this moment when we've got troops deployed all over the globe. To live up to the standard of every single local elected official in my state, whether they're Democrats or whether they're Republicans, who are making tough choices in this budget situation, but managing to respond to their constituents' priorities. This week in Colorado, they reached a budget agreement. The governor's a Democrat. The Senate is a majority Democratic. The House is Republican. The Speaker of the House, who is a Republican, said, "This is the first budget I've been able to vote for in years," because of the leadership of John Hickenlooper, our governor, and the leadership of the Democratic and Republican Party there. That breeds confidence in people's work. And I think that if we can find a way to work together here across the party lines in a bipartisan way and demonstrate that we can keep the government open, and much more important even than that, that we can create a path toward fiscal sanity in this country, I think the American people would cheer. Right now, we haven't given them very much to cheer about, Mr. President.